The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Their crimson warships cast shadows across 1,000,000 worlds, their bureaucracy stretched from the core systems to the rim, and their military doctrine had never known defeat. The Empire's strength lay not just in superior technology or numbers, but in an unshakable belief system. The strong commanded, the weak obeyed, and questioning orders was the path to chaos. Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation stood in the crystalline throne room of the Imperial flagship Dominion's Wrath, her hands bound behind her back with energy restraints that hummed with barely contained power. Around her, a dozen Zephyrian generals in their ornate armor watched with barely concealed disgust. Humans were a recent addition to the galactic stage, a species that had barely crawled out of their gravity well when the Empire first encountered them. The war had been brief and decisive. Earth's defenses had crumbled within months. The human fleet, though brave, was outgunned and outmaneuvered at every turn. Now Admiral Chen, commander of humanity's last battle group, stood as a prisoner before High Admiral Vextar, supreme commander of the Imperial Navy. Vextar was an imposing figure even by Zephyrian standards, 8 feet tall with the traditional, cranial ridges that marked military nobility, and eyes like burning coals. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of absolute authority that had been bred into his bloodline for centuries. "Human," Vextar began, the word dripping with contempt. "Your species' resistance ends here. You will order your remaining ships to surrender, and your worlds will submit to Imperial rule. This is not a negotiation." Admiral Chen raised her head, meeting the High Admiral's gaze without flinching. The other Zephyrian officers expected her to break, to plead perhaps, or rage against her fate. Instead, she asked a simple question. Why? The single word hung in the air like a physical presence. Several of the Zephyrian generals shifted, uncomfortably. High Admiral Vexitar's brow furrowed. "Why?" he repeated, his voice carrying a note of confusion that he quickly tried to mask with irritation. "Because we are strong and you are weak. Because it is the natural order." "But why? Is that the natural order?" Chen pressed, her voice calm and curious rather than challenging. "I'm not questioning your strength. Your empire has clearly demonstrated its power. I'm asking why strength alone determines who should rule." Vextar's jaw tightened. "Strength ensures stability. Order. The strong make decisions, the weak follow. This has been our way for millennia." "And has it worked?" Chen asked. "In 3,000 years of rule, how many rebellions have you faced? How many systems have tried to break away? How much of your resources go to maintaining control rather than building something better?" The question struck like a hammer blow. General Caxoth, one of Vextar's most trusted advisors, took a half-step forward. "You dare question the Empire's—" "I'm not questioning," Chen interrupted gently. "I'm asking. There's a difference. On Earth, we learned long ago that asking why doesn't make you weak, it makes you stronger. When my scientists ask why the stars shine, they discover fusion power. When my engineers ask why ships fail, they build better ones. When my people ask why we fight, they remember what's worth protecting." High Admiral Vextar was silent for a long moment. Around him, his officers waited for the order to execute this insolent human. Instead, something unprecedented happened. Doubt crept into his ancient golden eyes. "You speak of questioning as if it were a virtue," he said slowly. "But questioning leads to chaos, to disorder, to growth," Chen finished. "Tell me, High Admiral, when was the last time your empire innovated? When did you last create something new instead of simply conquering something that already existed? When did you last ask your subjects what they needed instead of simply telling them what they would receive?" The silence that followed was deafening. General Caxoth's hand moved to his sidearm, but Vextar raised a hand to stop him. The High Admiral's mind was racing, processing implications that had never occurred to him in 5 centuries of military service. "Your empire is strong," Chen continued, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. "But strength without purpose becomes tyranny. And tyranny, no matter how powerful, is brittle. It can only react to threats. It cannot adapt, cannot grow, cannot inspire loyalty beyond fear." And what would you have us do, human? Vexitar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Abandon 3 millennia of order? I would have you ask better questions, Chen replied. Not, how can we control, but how can we serve? Not, what do we want, but what do our people need? Not how do we maintain power, but what legacy do we want to leave? The words hung in the air like seeds in fertile soil. Admiral Chen watched as something extraordinary happened. She saw the moment when the most powerful military commander in the galaxy allowed himself to truly think, perhaps for the first time in his life. 3 days later, High Admiral Vexitar issued the most shocking order in Imperial history: the immediate cessation of all military operations and the convening of the First Imperial Senate in 2,000 years. Representatives from every world would be invited to speak, to question, to participate in governance. The Zephyrian Empire didn't fall in a day, empires never do, but it began its transformation from a tyranny into something unprecedented. A galactic confederation built on questions rather than commands, on growth rather than conquest, on the radical idea that asking why was not an act of rebellion, but an act of hope. And it all began with a simple question from a human admiral who understood that the most powerful weapon in the universe isn't a gun or a ship or an army, it's curiosity.